And here is the Artist's Almanac for February 18th, 2018. It's the birthday of film director and screenwriter Milos Forman, born in 1932 in Czechoslovakia. During Forman's childhood, his home of Czechoslovakia was occupied by the Nazis, and both of his parents were eventually sent to concentration camps where they both perished. After the war, Forman attended a boarding school for war orphans. He describes his school years saying, "I was surprised by the amount of pupils of our boarding school who actually had their own mother and father. There were a few boys who had lost their parents during the war, as I had, but most of them were children of ministers, diplomats, and the pre-wartime elite, and even of communist officials." Political parties competed to donate money to establish a new school for boys who had lost their families during the war. Due to the large amount of these donations, the headmaster could afford to have the best teachers, and it became the best high school in the country. Both the new communist elite and the old capitalist elite would try to get their own children into the school with the war orphans. Forman immigrated to the U.S. to shoot his first American project, Taking Off. Despite winning the Grand Prix at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival, the film was a commercial flop. Having to start from scratch, Forman moved from his rented house in Greenwich Village to the now famous Fleabag Chelsea Hotel. "That was the $1 a day period. It's a wonder I didn't turn into a can of chili con carne," he said in a 2009 New York Times interview, referring to his diet staple at the time. But Forman's fortunes were significantly reversed with his 1975 adaptation of Ken Kesey's novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The seminal film about life in an asylum went on to win all 5 major Academy Awards: Best Director, Actor, Actress, Screenplay, and Best Picture, a distinction that belongs to only 2 other films, Frank Capra's It Happened One Night and Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs. Forman went on to make some of the biggest films of the 1980s and 90s, with Hair, Amadeus, The People vs. Larry Flint, and Man on the Moon. All told, he and his films have been nominated for a total of 33 Oscars, with 13 wins, 2 for Best Picture, and with 2 for directing. Master filmmaker Milos Forman turns 86 years old today. It's also the birthday of another of my favorite directors, John Hughes, born on this day in 1950 in Lansing, Michigan. Through the 80s and 90s, Hughes put out a string of teen movies that would come to define a generation and launch the careers of numerous actors, including Michael Keaton, Bill Paxton, Matthew Broderick, Macaulay Culkin, and the Brat Pack, which consisted of Emilio Estevez, Anthony Michael Hall, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, and finally, Molly Ringwald, who, by the way, turns 50 today. The endearing tone of Hughes' films reflects his youth spent in Michigan and Northbrook, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, and particularly Glenbrook North High, which gave him inspiration for the films that made his reputation in later years. Hughes started out as a joke writer and, after dropping out of college, parlayed his talents to get an entry-level job at Needham, Harper & Steers as an advertising copywriter in Chicago in 1970, where his work often took him to New York to serve as a client in the same building as the National Lampoon magazine offices. Hughes subsequently penned a story inspired by his own family trips as a child that was to become his calling card, entitled Vacation 58, which later became the basis for the film National Lampoon's Vacation. Hughes' first credited screenplay was a flop, Class Reunion, which he wrote as a staff writer at the Lampoon during their struggle to recapture the runaway success of Animal House. But it would be his next films, National Lampoon's Vacation and Mr. Mom, that would be major hits, eventually earning Hughes a 3-picture deal with Universal Studios. Hughes' directorial debut, 16 Candles, won almost unanimous praise when it was released in 1984, due in no small part to its more honest depiction of upper-middle-class high school life, and was the first in a string of films set in or around high school, including The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Weird Science, and of course, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. To avoid being pigeonholed as a maker of teen comedies, Hughes branched out in 1987, directing the smash hit Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Uncle Buck, and his greatest commercial success, Home Alone, which was the top-grossing film of 1990 and remains the most successful live-action comedy of all time. On the morning of August 6, 2009, the cinematic voice of my youth, John Hughes, suffered a fatal heart attack while walking on West 55th Street in Manhattan. He was 59 years old. Thanks for listening. Be kind, do good work, and until next time.